dear colleagues. Good morning, good evening to some of you. If you are watching us through the Zoom platform, you can select your respective interpretation channel. We have today interpretation into English, French, Spanish, and Russian. Please click on the button interpretation and select your language. If you are watching us on Facebook Live, it will be in English and this webinar is being recorded. So later today, we will also upload the French and the Spanish versions so you can see it whenever you want. My name is Diana Junquera and I'm the Energy Industry Director at IndustriALL Global Union. And I would like to thank you all for joining us today in this webinar where we will discuss about the energy transition. As you all know, 2020 has been a very difficult year for all of us due to the pandemic. We have spent much of the year confined in our homes and we have to reorganize our activities. This has been one of them. We decided to work on this research on energy transition and the different actors that are involved, to know what are the role that they are playing and what is the impact that this has on the workforce. We would like to thank also the Frederick Ebert Foundation for their support on this research and also on this activity. In today's event, we are here with the coordinator of this research who will talk about the work that they have done and the key points that they have found in their research. We have also asked different national unions to join us to talk about the energy transition in their different countries and what can we do to ensure a just transition for workers. And now, before giving the floor to our General Secretary, Walter Sanchez, I would like to remind you that if you have any question or comment, you can type it in any language by clicking on the questions and answers button that you can see here on the screen or on our Facebook page. Now, without further delay, please, Walter, go ahead. The floor is yours.
Thank you, Diana. Can we take away this share screen?
Yeah, please take out the screen.
That's much better. So good morning, good evening, good afternoon, sisters and brothers. Nice to have you here in our webinar. I would like to wish you strength for the new year, although it's already the 21st of January, but I would like to wish you strength. It will be like every year, but this especially very challenging year in the middle of a pandemic. Wish you all strength and welcome at our webinar. And I hope it is informational for everyone. So as Diana was just mentioning, we last year, because of the pandemic and we didn't have the chance to have face-to-face meetings, so we discussed with FES that we had some projects with to try to reshuffle a little bit the resources of support that we have from FES. And they agreed that one thing that would be very important and useful for us would be a deep research on the trends, the major trends in the energy transition, to be a support for our affiliates in terms of looking ahead and make the plans and help us prepare for the immediate future and the major trends and major transformation that is going on in the energy sector. You know that IndustriALL puts a big effort. Energy is one of very strategic sector for us, and not only the energy sector itself, but also the whole supply chain of energy that goes from mining, steel, mechanical engineering, chemicals, and a lot of other sectors that are together on this. And also, you know that in the transformation into renewable energy, there is a major transformation in the sectors, in players, etc. So this report, we will have Rodrigo from INEP that will be speaking with us a little bit about the major issues in the report, and I invite all of you to read it in our website, is already there. And we would like to make this official launch in this webinar to raise awareness about the issue, to invite all our affiliates to read the report, because there are some very important information for us to prepare for the future. So among these, I would just jump into some very key issues, in my opinion, in the report that our affiliates should focus on, is the major trend that is going on in the sector, especially for the fossil fuels. That is, so one thing is about the prices. Yeah, that I just checked today, and the prices of the oil Brent is around $55, and the fact that it will never recover into the $140 that was in the past. That was a basis for a lot of investment that was made in the past, but it will never recover from that. And there are other, I mean, some sectors like fracking in the US that is a very costful sector. Most of the companies are about to go bankrupt. I mean, living on subsidies from the government. We don't know if the new administration, it's not likely that the new administration of US will keep supporting these companies, especially after one of the major points in the campaign of Biden-Harris was an investment of $2 trillion in what they call the Green New Deal. And right after the inauguration yesterday, Biden just announced that they're back in the Paris Agreement, which is a welcoming news for the whole world. But it sets a lot of other thoughts for us. And even if we were not in the position for a just transition, we cannot fight against reality. You know that, for example, we have some information which are very important for us to be aware of. For major investment funds, for example, are banning all new investment in fossil fuels. And you know that most of the oil companies are very much using leverage from investment funds. And those investment funds, the major ones, are already banning any new investment in fossil fuels, which means no new money, no fresh money for oil companies. And therefore, most of them are already investing part of their investments in renewables. General Electric and Siemens, which are companies that are due to not only build but also maintain thermal plants, they announced that they won't do this business anymore. They're withdrawing from this business of building and maintaining thermal plants, which is a sign also for the future. Those are the major players in this business. And finally, we see that the International Energy Agency is already estimating that wind and solar will overtake coal and gas by 2024. So in 3 years' time, they are estimating that the share of energy generated by wind and solar will overtake gas and coal. So this is a very important information for us. We see also that the big companies that are being are jumping ahead on these renewables, companies like Enel, Iberdrola, NextEra, Ørsted, are companies that few of us know about it, and are companies that we have to have a good look, because we have to improve our organizing on those companies. NextEra, for example, is an American renewable company that is a market value cap is equivalent to Exxon. Just to give you an idea of the importance of these such players in the sector. So all in all, I mean, I think it's an opportunity for us. I hope this research will help our affiliates to make some discussions, because something that we at IndustriALL in the agenda of just transition, we've been very vocal about the need for us as trade unions to transform ourselves, to seize the opportunity at the same time that we see the trends that oil and gas and coal are going down in terms of share of energy source. But we see also that we have an opportunity to organize workers in the supply chain of renewables, in mechanical engineering, what we call the green tech sector, in steel, glass, chemicals and fibers, everything that is in the supply chains of renewables. It's an opportunity. But our unions, our oil and gas unions exclusively, we have to run into our transformation so that we have the opportunity to organize those workers, and we have the strategic goal for us, which is grow our organizations and seize the new movement, on the greater share of renewables in the energy sector. So all in all, I just want you to again invite you to read the research, and I hope this can be a tool for all of unions to support, and a call for action for us to transform ourselves and seize the moment. So welcome to our webinar, and thank you very much. Enjoy it.
Thank you very much, Walter. Now I would like to give the floor to Rodrigo Pimentel from INEP. Rodrigo, the floor is yours.
Obrigado, Diana. Bom dia.
Thank you very much, Diana. Greetings to you all. Thank you, Walter, for introducing me, and greetings to everybody else who's on this call. My name is Rodrigo, and I'm the coordinator of this strategic studies, Institute of Strategic Studies on Petroleum, Natural Gas and Biofuels, INEP, in Brazil, as part of the United Federation of Oil and Gas Workers. So, I've got 10 minutes, and I'd like to talk you through what we've come across in this research project, and show you and talk you through some of the conclusions we've reached, which I think, as Walter said, is certainly of great interest to the workers around the world. Now, the idea behind this research is to understand how things are changing, how the renewable sector is upcoming, and look at the impact that's having on workers. So this is one of the aims, and we base this on three parts, if you like, three pillars in terms of the research. First of all, we wanted to understand how the oil sector is structured in the world today, what it is, who are the main players in the different countries, what are their positions, and to what extent are we going to be able to really follow the direction that's taken by the emergence of renewables. Part two, we looked more at renewables and to see exactly what this energy transition is going to involve in terms of the renewables, and what are the perspectives on the horizon for these groups, these companies in the future. And finally, from these first two observations, we want to look at the major oil companies, the influence of these companies on workers. We see major companies looking towards renewables as a future step, and how this is going to involve the workers in this just transition process. So that's the way that the research project has been structured, as I say, into these three parts. Got 3 or 4 researchers on board. A number of suggestions were made by Diana as well that helped us along the way. And we worked in this way, basically speaking to a lot of people from the companies, international bodies, and also looking at a lot of bibliography, a lot of literature from the sector, which is very important for us to be able to really assess the situation. But we also used this various other research efforts to use indicators and to see exactly how we could go into greater depth. We wanted to have a more structured approach to look at the elements that are really going to affect the workers in these major companies through the just transition process, and see exactly what can be done and how people are going to take this information on board going forward. So I'm going to try in the 5 or 6 minutes I have left to give you a systematic view of the main conclusions, the main thrust of this research, and what we take away as the most important points in terms of the transition and these major companies. The first thing we did was we looked at the world of oil production, and we've seen over the last few years that there are big countries that have emerged that are very reliant on energy sources. We look at these big countries, the US, China, Europe, and Russia, but also Canada, Brazil. Oil is an instrument not only in terms of sort of energy disputes, but also in terms of their goals to become independent from the point of view of supply. So this was a way that these countries have to try and reduce their dependence on this product, which they need from other countries. It's been a policy move. It's also been a cause for disputes between countries. So this factor of new producers, new products in new areas, we think is very important. And the first main conclusion from this part is this. Well, first of all, I'm going to do a more general analysis of the situation, but we want to see what's happened since the onset of the pandemic. Now, there is a profound uncertainty across the sector. This could lead to a collapse of the sector, but in terms of oil production, but it could also have the opposite effect. We've certainly seen an enormous drop in oil prices, as Walter said, but there are going to be more changes. The price is oscillating. Now, what we see is that as the price of oil falls, it makes it more difficult for renewables to be competitive. So cost is a very important element in terms of how things are going to go forward in terms of this mix. But the main conclusion of this part concerning post-COVID is that we've seen falling investments in production, but it was mainly the US and Canada, North America. The American companies have been very much affected by this and have taken a lot of decisions. So this is an instrument that's very important in terms of energy efficiency and energy independence. And that leads us to wonder what the situation will be for the sector in the future. Now, the second part talks about the transition itself. The institutions, the way that INEP sees the way these institutions are looking at this transition. What we can see is there's a lot of different views in terms of what the perspectives are. So what's, if you say, where do you think renewables are going to be in the energy mix by 2040? and the projections for renewable share of energy output vary from 7.7 to 27.4%. If we look at the debate around renewables, we see that there are a whole series of actions on a national level to help this sector grow in importance. But we can also see, on the other hand, that the technical and technological challenges are huge. And these are going to hold back renewables from really taking off in a very big way. From that point of view, in terms of the scale of things, we looked at renewables and all the different types of consumption. There are still a lot of technical and technological hurdles to be overcome. And we think that's going to slow down this movement. We think the movement toward renewables is going to be slower than originally thought. From our point of view at INEP, we see that oil is very, very important from a geopolitical point of view for many countries, and the technical and technological barriers are huge. And there are other elements that come into play, though. Financial markets are much more active in the oil sector, and there are a number of international agreements that try and speed up the transition. But I think they are still very hopeful about the future for oil, and that means that those organizations or those financial bodies are going to be blocking or at least slowing down the real takeoff of renewables. So I think things are going to go more slowly than initially thought. We need more incentives for that to really happen. And so there's a lot of uncertainty around this. Now, the research looks at the role of the major companies here in particular. So our conclusion is that the behavior of the major companies varies enormously from one region to another. You can't say there's a general pattern. What's very interesting to see is the behavior of different companies is very much associated to the national stance. The majors from the United States have a strategy that's very close to the US administration. The same goes for China, the same goes for Russia. So generally speaking, what we can see is that you've got American companies are very focused still on oil and gas and against shale gas, and measures that are less oriented towards renewables. The Americans, what they're trying to do is continue using oil and gas, but make those industries cleaner. There's a very important move towards that in California. But what we can see is that American companies are much more focused on decarbonization. If you look then to Russia and China, the situation is similar, but the companies are much more focused on energy independence. These are companies, countries rather, with a lot of state-run companies, with a lot of energy demand, and more wary about the transition to renewables. Within the energy security strategy, there is a real concern in Russia. They don't want to depend on any particular energy source, whether it's oil, solar, and gas, or what have you. But there are a lot of companies that are really very focused on the state budget. And then if you look to Europe, you've got a more aggressive approach towards building up renewables, but that depends from one country to another. In the UK, for example, they're not particularly pushing for renewables in the same way that, say, France or Norway are. So there are big variations between the operators in these countries. So we see from the data that the action of these companies is still very varied. If you look at what happened over the last 10 years, we've only seen 2 or 3% of investment in renewables. There are variations, of course. Some companies 6 or 7%. The American companies are more timid in their approach, but we can see that across the board, there is a general trend towards building up renewables, but oil companies really only have about 1% of their output from renewables so far. So we can see that the approach by companies like Total is a lot more daring. It's a lot more aggressive. They've got about 4% renewables in their mix. And they're looking at offshore wind production. They're really at the forefront of offshore wind production. But this is more timid than we had expected. Now, when we look at this process, it's still timid, and this just transition is still going forward at a very slow pace. We see that a lot of companies are debating the situation with the workers. Workers are very worried about the future prospects. We've had interviews to see how this process is going to go forward. Oil and gas sector workers, are they ready to migrate to this new reality, to this new sector? And with a few exceptions, generally speaking, they don't seem to be particularly focused on this or concerned about this. Now, quite often it seems from the responses to our work that a lot of that the concept of just transition is little known and barely explored in the oil and natural gas industry, and the same goes for union members. They don't really know much about it. And we have a debate that's very much focused around the current situation. We've looked at companies, some mention just transition, but many don't mention it at all. One from Total and another from Shell, I think, but other than that, nothing. So we realize that a lot has to change still in this debate, and we have to focus and keep a very close eye on companies to see exactly how this is going to go forward. I think I'm out of time now, but if you'd like to read my report, you'll be able to see all the details. Thank you very much for giving me the floor. Diana.
Thank you very much, Rodrigo. That's very good that you end your presentation with this, because that's the reason why we are asking our panelists to come here and let us know what is the situation in the different countries. So now I would like to give the floor to Michael Wolters from IGBC in Germany. I think that Michael, you have some slides to share. Please go ahead.
Yeah, thanks, Diana. I just try to open it. Sorry. Okay, I hope you can see it.
Yes, we can.
Yeah, I will start with that because as I have seen, the report is very much focused on gas and oil. We are not a country with a lot of resources in gas and oil. We have enough coal for the next 200 years, but we are phasing out the coal for environmental reasons, as I will explain soon. Just to explain what we are and where we come from as a union, my union in Germany, the IGBC, is an industrial union organizing miners and workers in the energy-intensive industry. And as every union, we are dedicated to the interest, wealth, and protection of our members. And furthermore, As a union with a political vision, we support sustainability and the fight against climate change. But to bring all these points together is not easy, because sometimes there is a kind of clash between different ideas, and we have to deal with that. I'm coming to the next. We as a country only exploring 6% of our demand on gas. We are now in a position that we produce nearly 0.5% of our use on gas in an organic, sustainable way. We use corn and the outcome of the cattle breeding in the farms, yeah, to produce that. And especially the natural gas based on corn will be increased in the next year, but it will never be enough to yeah, deliver all our demands. When it comes to crude oil, it's much less. It's only 2%. And in total, we use more than 110 million tons each year for the transport sector as gasoline, diesel, and so on. And in that field, we produce 3.4 million tons organic diesel based on rapeseed oil. This can be increased. So we have partially already some sustainable sources. When you look on our energy production, you see that our biggest resources are black coal, it's 9%, and lignite, which is 20%, and wind, which is nearly a quarter of our energy production. And this, in fact, will lead to the situation that in the year 2019, we produced already 46% of our electricity demand on renewable, which is mostly wind. We don't have so much hydroelectric power. And on top of that, solar panels. And 54% is still based mostly on fossil fuel. And please remember this 515 terawatt hour production per year. Our black coal mining ended in 2018. The reason to phase out was more politically based on the fact that we need state aid to be competitive, because our coal mines had to dig very deep and we cannot compete with the coal from the United States, Australia, or Colombia. And that leads to the fact that we lost 100,000 of our members from 97 to 2018. And our political fight was to make sure that nobody will fall down and become unemployed. So we negotiated with the state a solution that everyone find a new position or had the chance of early retirement, which needs a lot of investment from the state. With the lignite, we are now in the procedure to phase out until the year 2038. That was decided 2 years ago. And currently we still have 20,000 mine workers in open pit mines in 2 regions in Germany, in the eastern part in the Lausitz, and in the western part near Cologne at the region around Garzweiler. Here it's also promised to have no dismissal until all of them had to stop to work for that. But as you see, this is not possible without support from the state and investment, what we call just transition. What I want to mention here on this point, because there's a big program in the European Union under the title of just transition. This so far is only meant for the mining sector, because we have big regions in eastern countries like Poland, the Czech Republic, Hungary, and Bulgaria, where when we have to stop mining there, you need a lot of money from the EU to make sure that there are no social damages. If we want to extend then to other branches like oil fields or whatsoever, we have to discuss that carefully, because you cannot put more branches in the same budget. Then you have to increase the budget. That's maybe important for the future. Furthermore, that's special in Germany. There is no majority in our society to produce electricity based on nuclear energy. Most of the Germans believe it's not safe, and they are afraid what happens with the nuclear waste in the future. So therefore, we also stopped using nuclear energy at the end of 2022, which is already next year. And this creates a lot of challenges in our market, as you will see. Here, that's a forecast of the energy mix in January in 3 years. What you can see, the green peaks, these are wind energies. The brown peak below is lignite coal, and the gray is black coal. And the orange one is gas, what we still have. So far in this projection, we will have enough electricity for our demands. But when you see that nearly half of the production, when there is not heavy wind, is based on coal and gas. And if we stop using coal and gas, we have a huge gap in our demand on electricity. And to make sure that there is no blackout, or we have to stop our energy intensive industry to produce, and we'll lose a lot of workplaces, we have to make sure in the near future that we have enough electricity. That's the big challenge in our society. And as you see here, as an example from one branch of energy intensive industry, which is the chemical industry, they made a forecast how they can get out of the greenhouse gas emission. And if they end up at 0 in 2050, which is the aim of the European Commission, they need an additional demand on electricity for 628 terawatt hours. And this is exactly 120% more than we produce today. So you see, we have to double the energy production in Germany just to make sure that there is no carbon dioxide emission in this industry. This is not taking into consideration the demand and the need of the steel industry, for example, or others. So we have to extend our electricity production in the future enormously. And that's another big challenge. And on top of that, if we do that, we need more hydrogen. This is also a reason for the demand of electricity, to split water into oxygen and hydrogen. And so we have to increase our use from 1 million cubic meters to 8 million. And that's a big political and engineer challenge so far to deliver that. And that's where we are focused on, to make sure that we still have a decent industry, enough workplaces for our members. And that's what I want to show you. And I'm open for any more questions if there are something. So thank you for listening to me.
Thank you very much, Michael. Thanks a lot. I'm sure that it will be some questions later. Now I would like to give the floor to our colleague from Australia, Peter. Thank you very much. We know that it's very late there. It's 10 p.m.
Okay.
Thank you. Please, you can take the floor.
Thank you, Diana. Look, in my presentation, which I seek to keep short, I will be talking about just the workforce transition issues, but I will give you a little bit of context. Australia's in the unusual situation, developed country, but its main export industries are minerals and energy. Coal is, we're the biggest coal exporter in the world. Though we're not the biggest coal producer in the world by any stretch, but we are the first or second biggest liquefied natural gas exporter, alongside Qatar. So what we're dealing with here is not just a domestic transition issue, but our international trade transition. Because the coal industry is Australia's second largest export industry after iron ore, and the LNG industry is the next largest exporter. So our international trade is based on fossil fuels. So very big challenge for Australia here. Now this union, my union, is mostly in coal mining. We do have a maritime division which has workers that are in oil and gas, offshore oil and gas. But the big chunk of our membership is in coal mining. Now, what the INEEP report said was very interesting to me, about essentially saying that the unions in oil and gas know very little about just transition, and they also have the view that the oil and gas industry is going to continue on quite strongly for quite a long time. And the oil companies themselves often think that. A key issue was that the oil and gas companies are largely not talking to their workers about the possibility of fossil fuel decline or the requirement for transition for the workers. So it's all going to come as a bit of a surprise when it happens. And this is the experience in coal mining, I think. And we have the problem that where it's not talked about and where it's not discussed a long way in advance, there's quite a lot of denialism. Now, in Australia, we have the situation that we've had a lot of big climate debates in Australia. We even call them the climate wars. And about 20% of the Australian population does not believe that global warming is a problem. So that's the sort of level of, what's the word, dissension, lack of consensus on the need to address global warming. But what we face in Australia is a situation that domestic coal power is already strongly in decline. Fundamentally, not because of government policy, but mostly because of the improving economics of renewables. Australia is actually very rich in solar power and in wind. Coal, we were the developed country that was most reliant in the entire world on coal. I think we had 85% of our power came from coal. It's now already dropped to 70%. It's widely expected to drop down to 50% or less in just 10 years. And it could well be a great deal more reduction than that. So we have a situation where our coal power workers accept the need for transition because the owners of the coal power stations already have put closure dates on all their stations. It's required by law in Australia now. You have to have a closure date. And so that's already been announced. So the coal power workers are interested in transition and very alive to the issue. And we are doing negotiations around collective bargaining agreements around redundancies and retraining and relocation. But the export industry has still been growing until quite recently. I believe the data is that global coal production was actually peaked in 2013, but it didn't peak in Australia. It's still been growing. Whereas in Europe, coal's been in decline for a long time. And in the United States, coal is also strongly in decline. But in Australia, it's still been growing. But we've just had the announcement, just in the last few months, that Japan and Korea will both seek to have net zero emissions by 2050, and China announced it will seek to have net zero emissions by 2060. Now, those three countries account for 75% of Australia's coal exports. And cutting down on imports of coal for coal power generation will be the easiest technological thing that they can do. Most other areas of reducing emissions are harder. So we can expect coal exports to start declining in Australia sooner than we thought, I think within 5 years. Now, we have no consensus on just transition in Australia, or even that it's a priority. It's still reducing emissions is still thought of as a technical issue and an investment issue. We did have a worker transfer scheme for one coal power station closure in the last 2 years, a big coal power station, but that worker transfer scheme was not successful. We need to have a mandatory scheme in place to manage this. And it's been the case that coal power workers, when they've had to change jobs, the new jobs are not as good as the ones they lost. And renewable energy jobs in Australia are actually particularly badly paid, and there's a lot of use of even illegal immigrant labour in the renewable power industry, and a lot of breaking of minimum wages. So we have this situation where transition of the need for it is being embraced by the coal power workers, but reluctantly. But the export industry, the workforce, still does not believe it's going to happen. And we have a massive job ahead of us to actually convince the export workforce that the export industry will decline. It seems to be the oil and gas industry that is the focus of the unique report. That's the same issue. I think transition is going to come sooner than you expect. And if you don't talk about it until it starts happening, it's too late. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Peter. Thanks a lot. Now we are running late, as normally we do. I would like to give the floor to our colleague Marta from Colombia, from USO. Marta, I will ask you to be brief, and yeah, please go ahead.
Bueno, buenos días para
Thank
todos.
you, and greetings to each and every one of you, sisters and brothers. Greetings from the USO, the Workers' Trade Union body from Colombia. We're happy to take part in this meeting today to share everybody's view and to hear everybody's view in terms of the situation as we're facing it. The idea is to see what we're going to do and take stock of the current situation. So, Diana has asked me to put things in context. I don't want to make things too complicated. I want to keep things brief. So, Colombia currently has an energy matrix focused on energy production using hydroelectric sources. We're very, very focused on this. About 70% of our energy is produced by hydroelectric. And additionally to that, we have thermal or thermic production, about 29–30%. And this is the sector which is being gradually phased out. We've closed a number of thermal power stations. And what is happening is that the oil companies are looking at different ways to produce energy. Now, in around 2014 in Colombia, we started to see a raft of legislation which made it clear that it's very urgent to move to this energy transition. And that was written down in law. So certainly, as far as the hydroelectric situation is concerned, we are, I think, one of the best equipped, if you like, countries in South America in terms of water sources for this kind of energy production. So we're going to be generating a lot more energy this way. In the 1990s, the end of the 1990s, we suffered a lot of power outages, power cuts, and changes were made to the energy mix in our country. Hydroelectric continued to be very important. And this is something that's a complicated situation for the thermal production because, of course, there are new regulations concerning environmental concerns, and this means that we're trying to scale down everything in terms of coal-powered power stations. We currently have 9% of the power produced by coal-powered power stations. We want to have energy sovereignty in our country. And so we're on the horns of a dilemma because we don't have enough reserves, certainly in terms of oil. We do have coal, but most of our coal is exported to Asia and other European destinations. So we're running out of coal for domestic use. And the USO and other affiliated trade unions, we're seeing there's a lot of closures. Things are becoming more complicated for workers. Well, we've been hearing about this across the board around the world in terms of coal mine workers. And then we see that the energy transition is very much a buzzword right now. We're trying to make sure that that happens, but we don't know, as the first speaker said, we don't know how, we don't know when that's going to take place. You can see as you read the literature and you look at the media, we hear a lot about this buzzword, but if we look around us, we can't really see exactly how many projects are out there in terms of renewables. It really is in its infancy right now. We are looking at the current situation and we see that we need to move towards renewables, but they're not really taking off. As we're not really moving to the energy transition. Secondly, let me say, we're a little bit behind in terms of retraining our workforce for a possible move towards an energy transition. If we have this transition, we're going to need to retrain the workforce. So there's a lot of work to be done on this. Certainly in the short term, an immediate situation is that as a trade union movement, we are pretty much overcome by the pandemic, but also by this urgent need to keep up with environmental rules and regulations that are coming out and finding the way forward to a genuine energy transition. We need to really focus on how this is going to happen. For the last 2 or 3 years, this should have really been taking off. We're looking at the data from the IPPC, and it's not happening as fast as it could. And we've got to grasp the nettle here. So I think it's very important for us at the USO organization to put out a request and an invitation to have more information from the panelists here to help us look at the alternatives and see how we can really make this transition happen. And within that, how are we going to transform jobs? How are we going to retrain workers? because all of us that are working for trade unions see, as we've heard from our German colleague, the situation is that jobs are being shed, jobs are being lost. So how are we going to face up to that? It's a real issue in Colombia and across the Americas, across Latin America. And it makes things a lot more complex for us than, for example, in Europe. Because we have a real absence of responsibility by the state. That's what we're really lacking in Colombia. So we've got to find alternatives. Thank you very much, sisters and brothers. Thank you, Marta, for your words. Now I'd like to give the floor straight away to Jesus from Spain. Jesus, I know I'm asking you to really be very brief, but we are out of time already. So please try and make as big an effort as you can. Thank you. Well, thank you very much for inviting me along to be a panelist to present the case of best practices from Spain. In Spain, just as the EU has decided to reduce pollution levels, we've gone further than that in Spain, and the climate change laws and the national plans have led to a just transition document in Spain, which has come into our negotiations with mine closures, pit closures. We are looking at how that has also affected the closure of thermal power stations. We've got 15 in Spain. They've all asked for a closure. We've got a tripartite agreement between the companies, the trade unions, Comisiones Obreras and UGT, and the ministry, in order to try and find a solution for the workers and the regions, the areas in which these power stations are based. Now, the main thrust of this agreement works in 3 phases. Workers, new investments in industry, and retraining and reskilling. First of all, we're looking at the own staff, and the trade unions are very well constituted within these areas, and they've reached agreements already to see how these workers are going to be retrained to do new jobs, so they won't actually lose their jobs. As far as external workers or third-party workers, we've got an agreement so that they can work on a priority basis in dismantling, decommissioning these power stations and new companies and sectors that will emerge. There's an agreement between the ministry and the Labour Ministry to have a pool of workers so they can have access to retraining. Now, to investments, the companies have been asked to give additional measures as to what they plan to do. And that's very important because this is being put on paper, and these companies are going to actually invest more than 40 million euros in renewables, photovoltaic, wind, green hydroelectric, digital networks, transport, distribution, improving data and relations with customers, and also attraction of new investment from new suppliers or providers, or people prepared to invest in this these sites. And another very important area is training and reskilling, where all electrical utilities need to put on the table for this pool of workers in the areas concerned to provide work and training, for example, in helping to maintain and repair solar panels, wind generators, heat pumps, and so on and so forth, so that they're part of this transition. So they are hired, they're recruited to help dismantle and decommission these power stations. That'll take 3 or 4 years, and then help to set up these new methods. We're working in a 2-pronged approach, a working group with the ministry and the trade unions, that's Comisiones Obreras and UGT, with the companies, so that we can decide exactly how we're going to be working in each and every one of these headings I've mentioned, and then a high-level committee with the ministry, with the Secretary of State, of the Environmental Transition Ministry, to talk with the people in charge of these big electrical utilities to see how this can be done hand in hand. And after a couple of years, we need to have a final report with all of our findings. We are making good progress here. And I think I've been very, very fast in what I had to say. I hope that was all clear, and I'm available for any questions you may have. Thank you, Jesus. That was fantastic. Thank you very much indeed. This is all up in the website, the agreement with the Spanish trade unions, and anybody can consult that.
Now I would like to give the floor to our comrade from South Africa, Enos Mbodi. Please, you take the floor.
You're muted. Unmute, please.
Okay, thank you so much. Can I
yes,
go
we
ahead?
can. Yes, we can. Go ahead.
Thank you so much for the opportunity. Good afternoon from South Africa. I'm Enos Mbodi from the National Union of Metal Workers of South Africa. And what I'm going to share with you, very, very important socio-economic challenges that connect to just transition. And I just want to indicate that ESCOM is the biggest supplier generator of electricity in South Africa, plays a huge role in the political economy of the country. And I just want to also indicate that just transition is the word that is now being taken very, very serious, although there needs to be more work that needs to be done there. For instance, there has been a social compact that was signed between the government, organized business, organized trade unions, organized community. I must indicate, though, that it was not as inclusive as it was supposed to be, because NUMSA was not part of the liberation. So even the signature, our signature and our input is absent in that social compact. I must also indicate that there is what is happening in South Africa now, unbundling of the same ESCOM, unbundling it, generation, transmission, and distribution, which we believe is preparation for privatization. Now, I must also indicate that we represent the interest of the worker, who needs to know, who want to understand what will happen to their job. For instance, when you, even though you move from fossil to renewable, all that you need to do is to make sure that you pull everybody in so that they understand exactly what you're doing. And that is where we are running short, because the people who talk about jobs, they talk about jobs as if there is no green employment and green unemployment. So in essence, when jobs are destroyed, we should be able to know, quantify how many jobs are being created by green energy. By so saying, we look at the quantity, we also look at the quality. It is very, very important not just take one ball figure. Should be able to say, if we create 1 million jobs and we lose 2 million, what does it mean to the socio-economic challenges that are already burdening the poor and the working class? All we are trying to do as NUMSA is trying to make sure that we don't gang up against the poor and the working class. We don't have to stand on the side where we look like we are anti-poor. We are not only looking at the job, we are also like just transition. It's not only about jobs, it's also about the local economy that we created around food. As that changes, there should be a way in which just transition clearly outline exactly what that's done. In South Africa, we have local economies like the one called Witbank in one of the provinces. If you take away coal and you take away the coal-fired power station, you don't have that local economy dies. You've got now what is called a ghost town. all those needs taken into consideration, because workers come from society. Each and every time they go to work, they come from society. So all things that just and fairness in just transition need to be considered. The last point I want to make, we have just stayed appointed to participate in the presidential climate change coordinating committee on the 17th, that letter, which actually means we do believe to make a lot of inroads. We have got to make a lot of inroads in policy formulation, policy direction, state, so that we change the cost of the ship for the poor and the working class and the workers in Canada who have got out that we need to break down understandable parties. Because as it is now, we don't want to send in public and say there will be jobs which we can't quantify, which we can't qualify. So, but you know, one thing that should not confuse anybody is NOMSA supports the shift to renewable energy. But what should be done is it should be done in just and a fair manner, which is transparent for everyone and which everyone can participate in and make. I will stop there and thank you so very much for listening.
Thank you very much, comrade. Thank you. Thanks a lot for being so summarized. Thank you, everyone, to all the panelists. Now we are receiving some questions that I would like to raise to our panelists. It will be very, very, very brief. So the first one that I have is, how can the affiliates best influence international governments to intervene in direct energy policies supporting fair transition of workers to green jobs and public ownership of utilities? Is the COP26 involved on this? I think that Michael Wolters from Germany, you would like to respond to this question?
I can, yeah. Sorry, I was a bit mixing up with the direct answer. I remember from the last COP meeting that there was a preparation on IndustriALL Global Union together with the expert from the energy sector. My colleague Ralf Bartels was involved as well. And there in this meeting in Katowice, there was a declaration from the trade union on just transition. So this is the general approach from IndustriALL Global and their affiliates on the COP meetings. And when there is a need to influence from there, also the national governments, this should be, bring into the discussion before the next COP. I guess it will be in Scotland, and to make sure that this will be raised by the trade unions. And from there, this is the way IndustriALL usually try to influence the global debate. That's what I understood.
Yeah, thank you very much. It's exactly that, Michael. We will also be taking part of that COP26, so for sure the workers' voices will be raised there. Another question that I have, and I think that this is for all of you, you can respond, whoever you want, is what prospects do you see related to the transition from fossil fuels to hydrogen, either green hydrogen or blue hydrogen, and with carbon capture and utilization storage? What do you think that is going to be in the future? Who wants to respond? Okay, Jesus, please go ahead.
A ver, yo creo que en Europa.
I think that in Europe there is a strategy that's really betting quite heavily on hydrogen as an energy source. There are a lot of opportunities in this energy vector, I think. For example, in Spain, all the energy utilities are taking part with clearly defined projects, and they're investing a lot of money to use this and change the way transport runs, particularly maritime transport to aviation. This is a determining factor where you could have, where you do have high levels of pollution in heavy industry. So at least in Spain, there are a lot of huge projects currently at the study phase up to 2022. And these will be put into practice from 2023 onwards. There's a lot of money that's already been earmarked for this by governments. And I'm convinced that that will produce fruit, it will produce results.
Muchas gracias, Jesús. Thanks.
Thank you, Jesus.
Thank you very much. Now there is another question that I think that can be responded by our colleague from South Africa, and is how are the workers from the mining sector in South Africa will be integrated in all this energy transition, in all this process in the sector? Comrade?
Like earlier, I'm not how a social compact that was signed. We were not part of that social compact. We have got to go deep and look at how inclusive it has been, because I don't want to lie to you here and indicate falsely so that I know. I really we just only received the social compact signed and sealed. We are still studying it. We are not yet sure of how it's gonna be when it is excluded other federated and excluded other trade unions. We are doubtful of how far the by and that's
Thank you very much. Your sound is not very good now. So what we are going to do is to respond the questions by email. If the people who is sending the questions can please let us know their emails, we will send it to the panelists, and they can give you a proper response by email. And the last question that I have received is about the renewable energies and the creation. A colleague from the UK, from Unite, is asking, how big are your nations going in the creation of renewable energy, and what other challenges do you foresee to decarbonize? Maybe, I don't know, who wants? Please put the microphone closer. Yeah.
If you could repeat the question so that there is a part that I missed.
How big are your countries creating renewable energies?
Oh, well, we are still very in infant, really. It's not as big as I mean, according to the IRP document, Integrated Resource Plan, that talks about the energy mix. It was supposed to move very, very big. In terms of the sector itself, the sector is not really big. It is international, including the production of technology. We don't have much to talk about, and we do believe that they can be very if towards own renewable sector, which involves by and large the poor and the working class, and so that they may decide how they generate this fatigue in this renewable sector. Right now, we are not as big as the wanted.
Okay, thank you very much. Jesus, do you want to say something about this? Your microphone is open.
Sí.
Yes. Well, in Spain, we've got a series of strategies concerning renewables. As I already said, there's a very big involvement and big investment from the sector. Today, electrical generation from renewables is 49.92% in Spain. It's nearly 50%, nearly half of the whole output. We have a lot of different strategies in wind, offshore wind power, and on land wind power. This is really very big, and we propose to create niche jobs, niche employment opportunities in the renewable sector. A very key sector, which we hope will be able to take the overspill of workers who are losing their jobs at the power stations and the mining industry. It's very important. However, in Spain, Siemens Gamesa, for example, are closing factories and they are building the equipment that we need, and we can't fathom why that's possibly happening. They're building the wind equipment and the solar equipment. We need to turn that situation around. We need to be very careful with a delocalization of the builders of these renewable infrastructure.
Very much, Jesus. We need to finish this webinar. I know that we could stay here talking for hours, but our interpreters need to leave. So I would like to thank you all. Thank all the panelists. Thank you, Rodrigo, as well. Thank you very much. We will receive the questions by email. We will send it to you. We will also share the presentation that Michael has shared with us. So I would like to thank you all again. I want to thank as well to the interpreters for their fantastic job. And we will continue with this discussion about energy transition that, as you know, is going to take a lot of time in our agendas in the coming months. So thank you very much and take care. Thank you. Bye-bye.